I will now call this special meeting to order on February 27, 2019 at 3:30 p.m. and ask for a roll call from Madam Clerk, please.
Miller.
Here.
DeBoer.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Blanford.
Here.
Dara.
Here.
Wieland.
Here.
Green.
Here.
All members present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Excuse me. New business item 1 this afternoon is a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an agreement with Wantman Group to perform parking consulting services relative to College Hill parking study. Is there a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion second. Any discussion from council? Mr. Blanford?
Director Sheets, this might be for you, but I'm glad we're moving this forward so quickly. The only question I had, I know at the last meeting we had a real brief discussion about the possibility of needing to do 2 counts, basically one while UNI is in session and one while UNI is not in session, to get kind of an accurate representation. I don't know if that was something that was discussed anymore after that.
We did actually sit down with a consultant to talk about timeline, because again, the student factor is obviously a major factor in this. So he for sure, wants to get a lot of that data counts and all that stuff in a stakeholder, at least one stakeholder meeting before the students are gone, and the surveys and that type of thing. We did talk about, I think we can, as the process goes along, see what the counts are, and that might help determine whether we gotta do different counts. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. We'll keep talking about that with him and kind of see what his thoughts are after maybe he does the initial counts.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments by council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I vote to table this discussion until next Monday night's City Council meeting.
It's been motioned by Councilman Green to table the initial motion here until such time as next week, specifically at the council meeting. Is there a second? Not hearing a second. That motion fails. It does now go back for a motion and second. Any further discussion from council? I will open it up for the consulting portion. It's a little bit unique and different. If anyone has a public comment, limited to 3 minutes for the parking study. Again, hearing and seeing none, this requires a roll call vote, please. Mr. Cruz?
I vote yes.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2 is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding with Teamsters Union Local number 238 relative to shift scheduling. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. I will open it up first to council comments or questions. Hearing and seeing none, before we move to what I will allow for a public comment for 3 minutes, I'll have Director Olson give a brief explanation for this particular item.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I'd like to just kind of go back in time a little bit and talk a little bit about when some of this cross-training began. In late 2014 and early 2015, the Police Teamsters Union approached the city about a public safety model in regard to creating a public safety officer classification within the police union. And I believe we have a graphic here or a copy of a letter that they sent us. So they were interested in creating this classification within the police union. This would allow us to create that public safety officer classification, and they negotiated a wage for that position. We'd had some cross-training that started back in 2005, in which we had other city employees could cross-train to be a police officer or a firefighter in around that 2005 up to about, well, up to current times actually. We still have paid on calls. And these are individuals to be cross-trained on the police side or the fire side that were city employees that would work on an overtime basis or a different pay type basis to assist police and fire when needed. And so the public safety officer program was kind of created from that POC program, or kind of modified, because the POC program didn't put that number of people we needed, immediately at the fire scene there. The public safety officer program does, because they carry their fire gear in the car 24/7, and they're able to respond to calls as needed. So what we're doing today is we're approving a 24-hour schedule to put in the Teamsters Police Union contract. That allows for members of the police officers that are in the union to work a 24-hour shift fire shift. So in essence, they moved to the fire department. They worked that 24-hour shift as a full-time firefighter would. And again, as I indicate, this affects union members only, and our intent is to move 4 of the public safety officers to those shifts as soon as possible, probably as early as next week. Now, you may recall back in October, we moved 4 others to the fire shifts, and they work a 24-hour shift. Now, those were supervisory positions and not under the contract. That's why we were able to do that back then, and we need to do this to move the other members there. So, that is our intent. One thing I would like to add is that as we work through this model, we're able to provide more police officers on the street for patrol, as well as more people responding immediately to fire calls, and more upon the call back when they're needed for the more serious calls.
Very good. Thank you, Director Olson. I will open up for the public again. If you're more than welcome to come up. 3 minutes is the max as far as the special meeting is today, but if you want to come up and give your name and address for a 3 minute, please come on up.
Good afternoon. Sarah Langle, 1312 Windsor Drive. I emailed all of you last night actually, after I found out about this meeting, and I want to thank you first for your prompt reply to my email. I appreciate that. Your response actually brought up a couple more questions that I just wanted to clarify a couple of things and then ask some follow-up questions, so I'll go ahead and do that after I put on my old lady glasses. The first thing was, again, why is this meeting taking place at 3:30 in the afternoon when the vast majority of citizens are working? You said mainly because the P&Z meeting is in the council chambers at 5:30. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of meetings in the council chambers at 5:30, and that doesn't preclude the other meetings still from happening at 7:30, or 7 o'clock. So still kind of curious as to why this meeting is at 3:30 in the afternoon. And then I'm also had the question of why the change from 8-hour shifts to 24-hour shifts. I think a lot of us remember getting that special edition of the Currents that you put out last fall. You wanted citizens to be aware that the 24-hour shift was very negative and very costly. You pointed out the exorbitant amount of sick time that the firefighters took. Your answer, Mr. Mayor, was the cost factors were pointed out because of the abuse of sick leave, not necessarily the 24-hour shift. The CFPD vote only affected the public safety officers assigned to fire. I can't help but wonder, are we still going to have the same abuse, as you put it? 1 sick day will now equal 24 hours, 2 sick days, 48 hours. It still seems like it's going to be an exorbitant cost, in your words. My next question was, since the PSO salaries are higher than firefighters, would this further increase the burden to the taxpayers? Your next sentence was, as one looks individually at a PSO and the firefighter, there's more costs for the PSO. I'm going to repeat that sentence. As one looks individually at a PSO and firefighter, there's more costs for the PSO. We have been told for I don't know how many years that this is a cost savings program. So I've asked numerous times, I know a lot of other citizens have asked numerous times, where the cost savings can take place. Since the salaries are more expensive, they have to have 2 sets of gears, and now you are telling me that there is more cost to a PSO, so why are we hiring more PSOs? I don't get it. You go on to say, as with any organization, folks with more credentials, degrees, certifications, et cetera, generally are compensated more. Again, I'm questioning that because the PSOs have Firefighter 1. Our career firefighters have Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, EMTB, which they don't have that. So again, PSOs, why are they making more money than firefighters when firefighters do have more credentials?
Ms. Langle, your time's up.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Before you come up, sir, was there any questions or comments from council to staff or each other, previous speaker? I do also want to mention that with the response towards PSO salaries being higher than firefighters, previous speaker was accurate. As one looks individually at PSO and firefighter, there is more cost for the PSO. I also wrote, of course, we also offer firefighters to cross-train as well to earn the additional salary. As with any organization, folks with credentials, degrees, certifications generally are compensated more, just as firefighters who have second careers by default earn more. As the public safety model gets further implemented and we move in a new building, there are incredible efficiencies added and more public safety bodies, so at minimum, we'll be able to decrease the absorbent overtime abuse currently burdening taxpayers $210,000 in 2018 alone by the firefighters. I just want to make sure Council was aware that there was more to that reply than what was given by the previous speaker.
If I may.
Mr. Miller.
To kind of go off of that, I mean, the PSO can serve in both roles, police and fire, correct? So they can be used in any number of different scenarios. So that efficiency, if you look at a PSO sitting in a box, if you will, sure, it looks like they're more expensive. But as you see those efficiencies come on both sides of the conversation, that efficiency is there, both on the monetary side as well as productivity per employee, I guess, if you will.
Yep. Anyone further from Council? Mr. Blanford?
Chief Olson, I know we've inquired a couple of times with you in the past about the initial training, the Firefighter 1 training for PSOs, and then subsequent training, whether that's Firefighter 2 or EMTB or hazmat or water rescue or whatever that looks like. Can you just touch on that, what your plan looks like?
When we train as a firefighter, the public safety officer trains to the Firefighter 1 classification. They're certified in Firefighter 1. And they go through a lot of other training, which would, could be what's known by many as the Jaws of Life type training, trench rescue training, all these different types of training, river rescue, ice rescue, all those kind of things. But when it comes to particular certifications, for example, we're not going to send the PSO to driving a fire truck class because they're driving their police car and will be responding, and their duties will never be to drive a fire truck. Now, when we take the PSO and we move them to the fire shifts, they will be operating a fire truck and they will be pumping. So that's one additional skill that they'll get when they're on working the 24-hour shifts. Now, I need to back up a little bit because the PSOs do operate the tanker truck. So there's certain vehicles they operate, certain vehicles they don't. There was a comment that the PSOs don't receive EMT training. Those on the police shift do not because they don't respond to the medical calls like fire do. They do respond to some of the more serious ones. They do have the AEDs in the car. They are trained to do CPR and that kind of thing. So there are varying degrees of training for every position we have. You have some firefighters that have specific training and specific skills. You have police officers that have training in certain skills that others don't. So you have different skills for all your employees, but we do go through an extensive training process, and it's also there's a 44-page skills manual, which I've referred to many times. Either a full-time firefighter or a PSO will go through, and they're taught by the firefighters as well. Just real briefly on the cost thing, I think a lot of things that people aren't aware of that this program helps with is, first of all, several years ago we eliminated 6 positions within the public safety department. So that is about a $600,000 reduction in personnel costs. There are increases to a PSO because they get a pay raise for that, which was negotiated by the Teamsters. That's a contractual obligation. But one thing that is not known to a lot of people is we're increasing the number of people responding to calls, both on police and fire side. That will slow the growth of the public safety department in years to come. So instead of us from the public safety department coming to the mayor and council and saying, hey, we need 3 extra people here and 3 extra people there, as the city continues to grow, we won't need to do that for a number of years. And there is a reduction in costs there, but the question is, how do you measure that? And that's not something we've talked much about, but there's certain different advantages there. I'd like to, so the end of 2018 ended a couple of months ago, and we review a lot of things that we've done in the past year. And one thing we've noticed is that as we average the number of hours that firefighters have worked, that police officers have worked, and specific PSOs, we have averaged 15 firefighters and PSOs working 24/7, 365, round the clock for 2018. Now, these are numbers you would not see responding to a fire in the history of this fire department. And our fire chief has been here over 30 years, and their minimum staffing anywhere from 6, 7 to 8, with a maximum staffing of typically about 10. Now, that doesn't mean round the clock we have 15 working. It means we may have 20 right now, we may have 10 tonight. But these numbers are continuing to increase. And we've had some fire calls recently where we've had some significant numbers of people responding. So we have some great numbers, and we have some great training going on. In fact, part of this study was, and this is off the top of my head, but I believe we had over 11,000 hours of training on the fire side, and that doesn't include any of the medical training that we did on the fire side too. So, we did some things in 2018 we haven't done the years before, and it certainly continues to show the efforts we're putting forward and some of the successes we're having.
Thank you, Director. Anything further from council?
Just to clarify, so when a PSO goes on a 24-hour shift, they will eventually get that additional training that the 24-hour shift firefighters have. Is that what you said?
Well, yeah, one of the first things we want to do is get them operating the trucks and becoming pump operators. That is one of the things we want to do most. And then just continue with their training as all firefighters and PSOs get throughout the year.
Thank you.
Mr. Whelan?
Just one quick comment. One thing that makes this program go is getting the support of the unions. The fire union has always resisted it. The police union came on board and said we support it. We see efficiencies for both Cedar Falls and for our police officers. So I just wanted to point out that distinction, and that's another advantage in getting the efficiency and the effectiveness of our firefighting force up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that by holding this meeting at 3:30, we're limiting the ability for the public to participate in this discussion. And I believe that if we took a vote now, we'd be showing a lack of respect to the voices of the residents who are being impacted by this decision. So I would again make a motion to table this for discussion until next Monday night's regular council meeting, sir.
Motion by Mr. Green to table this item until next Monday. Is there a second? That item does fail. Moving on to the original item, I'll forego any more council comments now. I know there's a gentleman who wanted to come up and speak for the 3 minutes here before the item's voted on.
Darren Yoder, 4204 Berry Hill Road. This decision today should let everyone in Cedar Falls know your stance on public safety. You haven't been able to communicate any kind of plan. You haven't provided any kind of proof that the PSO system will save Cedar Falls money. I like proof. Table this vote until we have proof this is going to save us money. You are winging it. You're not sure the direction you're going. But if you vote yes today, it's clear you intend to permanently replace the full-time firefighters with PSOs. You have sold the PSO system to the public as a way to, quote, supplement the firefighters, a quote from the assistant police chief. And we will always have full-time firemen, a quote from the longstanding at-large councilman. You've also said you don't want to micromanage staff, another quote from the Ward 1 councilman. But here's another quote you should hear that came from the public safety director who you as council and mayor have given permission to experiment with the city's safety. I was told by the director 3 weeks after our fire, you might be better off that your entire house burned down. You might be better off that your entire house burned down. Let that sink in. The quote came from a February 26th meeting I had with the director and fire chief. That same meeting where they showed me the helmet video of the house fire, the same video where the director said he had no idea what video I was referencing. You guys have seen the video. It exists. I have no reason to lie. I'm sure the director is going to deny his comments like he denied the video existed. So you'll have to consider which of us has more motive to lie. His comment included a story about a house on Searly that was half damaged by fire, smoke, and water. I was told their insurance company only covered half the damage or only covered the damage to that half of the house. However, since the house was over 100 years old, the entire
1 minute
thing
remaining, please.
needed to be brought up to code at the homeowner's expense. So the director told me that story and said they would have been better off if the entire house would have burned. And he said the same thing about our fire. That was an interesting perspective. My first thought was, did the guy who was in charge of our public safety just say that? To the very person who watched his house burn to the ground. You know how traumatic that is? To watch his flames tear through every room of your home? My next thought is, I wonder how many citizens of Cedar Falls have been informed of that opinion. How would insurance companies react if they knew? And now I'm asking council, how many of you share his opinion?
Thank you. Before the next speaker, any questions or comments from council to staff or members? Director Olson?
Yeah, I'd like to address that, Mr. Mayor. So, yeah, I'd like to go a little bit further. I believe there's been a few things that have been left out in reference to these comments. The comment about better off if your house burns down, that is a comment that was made by an individual who owned a home, and their home was partially damaged. The fire was put out. Their home had to be almost completely removed and rebuilt. And the comment of that homeowner was, I wish my house would have burnt to the ground. He actually wished his home would have burnt down because it would have been better for him and easier for him to reconstruct. So those, that's where that comment came from. There are individuals out there who have had significant fires to their homes, and when they worked through with the insurance companies and they worked through the damage, some of them said, I just wish it would have burnt down. And so that's where those comments are coming from. I'm not wishing that anyone's house, gets burnt down, but that is exactly where that comment comes from. So, I guess I kind of maybe take a little offense to the fact that, why I have motivation to lie. I don't know what the motivation to lie is. We've explained numerous times where the model is going, how it works, how other cities have implemented it, the advantages, what the costs are. People can have difference of opinion, and that is okay, but it doesn't help to spin other people's words.
Director, was that other fire, the gentleman indicated he had wished the fire had burnt down, was another fire in Beaver Hills, was it not?
Actually, I'm thinking of a different one.
Okay.
But I believe that might have been the same comments out there.
Right. Anything further from council? Ask Director
If I may, Mr. Mayor.
Please.
I think to clarify that point, I've had a fire in my house, and once everything's said and done, whether or not that fire engulfed your whole home or not, you've got fire hoses with a tremendous amount of water. Whether if your fire's on the second floor, it's damaging everything on the first floor. It makes sense how people would feel that way after a fire.
There's what a lot of people think is when you have a fire in your house, the damage to the home is limited to the flames. So if you have a two-story home and half of your upper story burnt, they think the rest of the home is okay, but it's not, because you have a tremendous amount of water damage, you have smoke damage, and you have a lot of heat inside the home, and you have heat damage. So you'll find that your building inspectors, your insurance companies are going to look at that, and they're going to say, we can't trust the wiring inside the walls of the house, so we have to take the walls apart, we have to get into the wiring, we have to look at, there's so many things to look at, and there's so much damage. Frequently, there's as much or more damage caused by the heat, the smoke, and the water than there's actual flames. So, there's a lot of different damage, and that's sometimes where these comments come from. When people look at their house and they go, gosh, all I got to do is rebuild this portion of the house, and then they realize, no, it's a lot more than that. When you go in those houses and you see that damage and you see things melted and you see water going through this ceiling to the first floor and then through the floor into the basement and that kind of thing. So, you know, people have commented on that, and I just think you know, I was trying to work with Mr. Yoder. We were trying to discuss the you know, what occurred out there, and you know, we're just being as honest as we can about it. I don't know what else to comment on.
Director, it was also mentioned on that helmet that was there, and as you've indicated to me, the folks down at Fire were given a directive from their superiors not even to have cameras down there, correct?
Yes.
And it was your intention or your belief that the cameras were received. No one else had a camera. So it was unique that there was a camera footage, and in fact, the officer who had the camera was the only one on scene with a camera. And we see continually with this video where the PSOs and where the PSOs. Can you also describe what else is supposed to be asked there by that kind of commander at that particular scene in that particular instance as far as callbacks, all firefighters? It's not just about where PSOs are.
Yeah, so the supervisor in charge, first of all, I'll get your camera concern. So we had some issues with the use of cameras, editing a video. We also had video being taken that we didn't know was being taken, and then we get requests for the video, and I'm not talking about the Yoder fire, because we knew there was video right after the video, and we talked about that. But about 6-8 months later, someone was talking about video, and I was obviously confused and thought they were talking about a different video, which I didn't know we had. But so what happened was we had video in files, in IT files. And we had someone made a request for a video, and the fire chief and I were talking. We said, we don't have any video of that one. So we were just about ready to report to that individual that we didn't have any video, but we sent the request to IT, as we typically do, so they can put the video in a format that we can distribute it. And they said, oh, you do have a video. And we said, we do. We didn't even know we had a video. That is kind of a serious situation for us, because if we get a freedom of information request for a video and we don't provide it, and we have it, we're in violation of law. And we didn't know we had all these videos. We also had, we gathered all the cameras, and we had a camera missing, and we're still unable to locate that camera. So, you know, we hope we don't have any more videos being recorded out there that shouldn't be or that we're unaware of. I believe he asked. The
call, but that particular commander was where the PSOs in that video over and over again.
Yeah, so I'm on camera, and he walks up and he says, where's the PSOs? I had just arrived at the scene. My immediate thought was he did a callback, which was done, and a callback is that you did a callback for other off-duty people to come from the fire station. Some to man a fire truck in case we have another call, others to come out that scene, because you need to rotate people in and out of those fire scenes so they can change air tanks and take breaks and that kind of thing. So I immediately assumed he meant who's coming on the callback. Because as you watch that video, he never does once say who's coming in for a callback. That's just to me automatically what I thought he meant. And when I said I will call, I don't know, I'll call and see, I called back to the fire station and said, hey, who's all here on a callback? How many are coming out? And we were coordinating those efforts. So those are some of the efforts that are always made at a scene where we call people in off duty, which happens at least half a dozen times a year. So that's kind of that's what happened in that particular scenario. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything further for Director Olson? Anyone else need to come up, please?
My name is Whitney Smith, 2904 Neola Street. In the past, you've argued for the PSO program being a money saver.
I'm sorry, can you put the microphone? It's hard to hear you. I think
Sorry.
I'm calling in. Thank you.
In the past, you've argued for the PSO program being a money saver. It has turned into a full-on replacement system of our professional fire staff. If we are paying PSOs $10,000 more starting wage plus 11% to, as you would say, sit around the firehouse, then please explain how we are saving money and how you are maintaining the safety of those who elected you. It seems that we have a large quantity of low-quality personnel earning more money. You all have damaged the quality and integrity of our fire department. You've targeted, gagged, and pushed them until they left. You have put all of our lives and our property in danger. The person you have heading your safety considers a total lost fire a blessing. How is this okay? Not only are you costing taxpayers more money, you're going to make our insurance rates skyrocket. You're going to cost someone their life, which will end up in a very costly lawsuit against the city. What's your ideal outcome of this program? When does it stop? What will it take for you guys to pump the brakes, slow down, and turn it around? I respect a person who can admit when they're wrong, but you guys keep ramming this down our throats. What you're doing is reckless and should be considered criminal.
Thank you. Before the next speaker, any comments or questions from council to staff or each other? Mr. Burke?
I'd just like to point out that we don't have any low-quality professional people. That's another misstatement.
Thank you. Anyone further in council? Next speaker, please, if you have. Just in the very back.
Minette Bell, Cedar Falls. It just seems like communication is a problem. Who's there to work? Who's there? Who's supposed to be at this fire? Who's supposed to be at that fire? It just seems like it should be let the firemen go to the fire, let the police go to the crimes. I know everybody wants to get along, and we're all a community. I don't think that there's bad police officers. I don't think that there's bad firemen. It's just very confusing. How is this been going on a couple years? Is the testing all done with all of the PSOs coming over to the fire department, or is it still in progress? When is this testing all going to be done so that there's proof? And the communication of you calling the fire department to find out who's there, that's just not right, I don't think. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Before the next speaker, council comments or questions from staff?
If I may, I believe Chief Olson, there's a process to all this. Any type of callback that goes back to the firehouse or whatnot is intended to happen for the communication purpose, correct?
Yeah, the callback process hasn't changed in dozens of years. It's the same process. So nothing has changed in that regards, in reference to the public safety officer.
As well, I guess, in Chief Olson's defense, I guess I've sat down and talked with him a fair amount of times, and I've never had him lie to me. So I get a little frustrated about that because I feel like that implication comes right back around here as well. And for myself, and I know for everybody else, at least that I've heard, I don't see anybody lying to anybody about this program. Facts, just as we see on every level of government or Facebook or any other thing, continue to get construed in whatever way that people want them to. And I just saw a post the other day. I emailed the fire chief about the response to the Victory Drive fire, got a set of facts, and saw completely different information being put out on Facebook. That is unfortunate, but I'm confident sitting up here with these folks and with these folks that this program can be successful. The biggest variable of this is our firefighters. We had a training happen the other day, and the trainer was training PSOs, and a couple senior firefighters walk in the room, and he asked them to come over and introduce themselves. Wouldn't introduce themselves. So for myself, I'm getting a little concerned on all aspects of this that something is going to happen out there, intentional or not, where something bad does happen. And I don't like it any more than the rest of us here, but at the same time, the firefighters are the variable. You take, I think, we did the Courier ran an article the other day about salaries. Some of our firefighters make $30,000 in overtime, half of their salary. That is huge. I don't know anybody that makes $30,000 in overtime in a year. So when you continue to hear that this is about money, it's unfortunate, but it appears that way.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Anyone further, Council? Mr. Blanford?
Director Olson, can you, to the previous speaker's question, just address how many officers have completed their training program and how many are currently in the training program?
Well, I don't have those exact numbers. I think we probably have 30 that have completed and another 10 maybe that's in various, well, either in stages or haven't quite begun their training yet. So that would be a close number.
Thank you.
To that point, training isn't going to stop for these folks, correct? I mean, whether police or fire or anybody, it's continuing ed throughout their careers, so.
Thank you. Anyone further? Next speaker, please, if there's one.
TJ Frine, 1319 Austin Way. Just a couple of questions. The little pamphlet that showed up on the screen there saying that this was approached by the police department as an idea in 2014 or 2015. My question is this police union driven initially, or we've been told several times that it's city council driven? The city council's driving this thing. So I just want to know whose initial idea was this? Was it the police department's idea based on what was presented earlier, or was this a city council thing? Another couple questions. With PSOs moving over to the firehouse, are we losing a cost of sending people to the police academy? There is a cost there. It's not free. $10,000-ish would be my guess. Are we sending them to the academy to then go to the firehouse? So are we wasting the $10,000? Kind of what's going to be the basis for that? The abuse of sick time or creation of overtime, as Mr. Miller said, I would submit to you that it is a morale issue. When you have people calling in sick and maybe abusing sick time, you have a morale issue in the fire department. And anybody with a set of eyes can see why that would be. One more question about PSOs and salary. They're obviously, the police officers cost more than firefighters. That's in their contracts. That's universally understood that that's generally the case. If they move over as a firefighter one into the firehouse, we're paying them more money than somebody that's been here 17 years, 20 years. And somebody that's just moving over now is essentially making more money than them. And the person making less money is required to train the new person, is what we've said. Because we've got firefighters training PSOs for firefighter one, but we're paying them less money to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Frayne. Again, before the next speaker, anything from Mr. Whelan?
Oh, one of the questions he asked was, did the police union initiate this action? And the answer is no. We started looking at increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of our fire department, 5 to 8 years ago, when we came into a budget crunch and we knew we were going to be running out of money. And at that time, we looked at 4 different scenarios. The first scenario was to maintain full-time fires. The second, which we'd already done, was to have paid on-call people, which we'd already implemented. The third was to go with an all-volunteer fire department. And the fourth one was to go with what's called a public safety officer program. So that was initiated by council through our goal setting. And I think it's about 7 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan. Anyone further from council? Director Olson, and there's confusion here or not, the document you showed earlier was from the budget task force, so it might have been initiated by the police union, but it obviously approved by council thereafter. I guess if you can clarify the difference between the timing and who brought it up. And
well, yeah, there was a lot of discussions around that time frame, around the budget. We had the budget task force and all sorts of efficiencies that the city was looking at and the council was looking at, throughout the whole city. And a lot of conversations came up, obviously, about what was, about police and fire costs, because it's some of the most high dollar costs for the city. And that was discussed during the task force, with the council, and I attended those meetings. And then also the police union, was aware it was going on, and we had that paid on call program since 2005. And so there was a lot of discussion between a lot of people within the city about, where we want to move to that. And the Teamsters first came to the table with that letter saying, hey, we would be interested in discussing that. So that's kind of where that came from. But, one comment to make on one of his questions about, the costs and if a police officer or PSO goes to the fire side, like we have done and like we intend to do next week. So the public safety officer will move to the fire side. There'll be a dedicated firefighter, just like the firefighters we have now. But the additional duties they will be doing is some of the during the downtime, and we have to be honest with ourselves. There's a lot of downtime in police and fire, and that's where we can capture. That's where we got room to improve. That's where we can make some more efficiencies. But those police officers down there during that downtime can do some police duties like they do now. Some of them are armorers, and they take care of the weapons. Some of them do investigative work and the downloading of certain evidence. And there's just different duties that they can do while they're down there, which makes them, a very efficient employee.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Mr. Miller?
There's been situations where you've approached fire about additional responsibilities where productivity could increase potentially. We
recently, as a matter of fact, several times over the years, we've approached them to help do, they do commercial inspections of commercial buildings per fire code. We also have rental property that we had one individual responsible for. We asked the fire shifts if they could help with rental properties, and the union grieved it, and we ended up going to, this was quite a few years ago, to binding arbitration, and the arbitrator said that the fire union has to do it, and they don't get additional pay for it because it's part of their responsibilities. And so we've had incidents like that where we've asked them to help in other areas, and they've refused.
Thank you. Anything further? Mr. Green?
Yes, Mayor. When I was notified about this meeting occurring, it was Monday afternoon. I was just requesting, I think we all were, for availability. And then yesterday afternoon, we received our council packets and the information around 3 o'clock. And I was assuming, this is the first time we've had, for my time in, a special meeting called outside of the regular order. And I had assumed that it was going to be some sort of an emergency or something that had to be answered right away. And I'm just not seeing that being the case here. If I'm misunderstanding, if we could know why a special meeting was required for this as opposed to being able to have it on this upcoming Monday night, 5 days from now. Could there be some clarification on that for the reason?
I'd be happy to. Just as the Courier indicated in their story, the emails have been sent out after the union voted for this Monday morning. And in the MOU, there is a requirement to have a 2-week notice, if you will, for those individuals that go to fire. But there's also a stipulation they can waive that. And a few of those folks had indicated they might want to waive that. And so for the sake of having this meeting, I felt it expedited that, maybe saved us a week in terms of having those folks go down sooner than not. In terms of the notification, just as any public meeting, is 24-hour notice yesterday, and it was published, and here we are. So, and again, it tied in also with the parking study as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Green, to your point, I guess from my point of view, there is a bit of an urgency to this in that, again, and to your point earlier, I don't love 3:30 meetings myself. I don't think anybody does, but the variable, again, is our firefighters. And to their credit, I got to believe that there's some guys down here who don't like or appreciate the contentiousness of this issue. But are we going to lose another firefighter tomorrow? I think ultimately this move is a move to make sure our community is safe and stays safe, no matter what happens at the firehouse. And this is within our control. And to me, it's a move in the right direction, just to safeguard something happening tomorrow or something happening the next day. or whatever the case may be, because similar, you know, there was a public safety video that was put out the other day about Firefighter 1 training. Fantastic video. The firefighter leading that resigned the next day. He did a terrific job in that. He talked about all of the things that we want and expect from our city employees, and then he stepped out. What happens tomorrow? What happens the next day? And for me, we have to keep our options open. And I think that's a benefit to every citizen in the community.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Mayor, in response to that, I certainly agree as far as the points that Councilor Miller made. The question that becomes to me, the convenience or the ability to move forward this week with public safety officers, weighing that versus the need to have the public able to weigh in on the decisions that we make. Does that outweigh public comment and public input? We certainly are seeing some, but how much more would we see if it was in a regular 7 o'clock meeting? So I'm thinking about the voices that aren't being heard right now. And that's why looking at this vote, same as with the previous, it wasn't specifically for or against that item, it's the process itself. And so I wouldn't be able to vote in favor of this, given that we don't have the public comment that is expected through open meetings law and through just democracy. So.
Did you just imply this is an illegal meeting, Mr. Green?
Not that it's an illegal meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone further from council? Anyone further from the public to come speak?
I too would like to, Sharon Reginald, 108 Lilliput Lane. I too would like to stress my dissatisfaction with this meeting at 3:30. I appreciate one of our council people standing up for the citizens and being a voice for us. It feels to me like this administration is taking away my voice. The representatives of this community are an extension of their citizens. There are only means for you guys to sit up here for everybody to hear our voice. And it feels like you're taking it away. One of our people have spoken out for us and said, we want a strategic plan. The rest of you shot him down and said, we don't need that. That's micromanaging. He's doing what the citizens have asked for. I feel like our voice isn't heard. I feel like our tax dollars have been stockpiled, that we don't have a voice in the public safety building that is being built. We didn't have a voice in University Avenue. There's enough money in this community that you guys can choose to do whatever you want without public input. There's never been a referendum vote or a bond issue vote that I can remember. And you talk about budget constraints and everything else, and yet there's always money to do what you want to do without public input. One of our representatives here is asking for that. He is asking for what we are asking for. And yet we come up with every excuse not to listen to the citizens. It's time to be transparent. It's time to ask the citizens if this is what they want. And if they want the PSO program, that's okay then. It's their taxpayer, it's their dollars, it's my dollars. That should be okay, but we should have a voice in this. But it seems like this 3:30 meeting is eliminating that, and the one person on here who is listening to the citizens and trying to support us, which we put him in office to do, is getting cut down by everybody else. I would like to have a voice back in this community. I would like to be able to have my tax dollars be used the way I want them to be used for. And I think that the citizens of this community, that's all they're asking for. And I just feel like it's a disservice is being done to myself and to my community.
Thank you, Ms. Reginald. Any comments, council? Anyone else for public comment? Hearing and seeing none, there is a motion on the table. Been motion and second. This requires a roll call vote, please. Mr. Cruz?
In favor.
6 voting aye, 1 voting nay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
moved.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.